Hi guys, Mary Beth Temple here, and I want to take you through how to knit this adorable toddler sweater. It starts at the collar. We're going to learn about basic raglan shaping because it's top down. We're going to add some little garter stitch trim. We are going to pick up stitches at the collar and work the hood from the bottom up. We're going to learn about this interesting little decrease pattern up here which closes up the hood. Then we're going to pick up and knit this garter stitch border and add some buttonholes. So stick with me in this video and I'll show you everything that you need to know to complete this adorable sweater. So I have all kinds of skills that I want to teach you, but let's take a second to go over materials. You're going to need a knitting needle, the size specified in the pattern. Now, I like to use a circular knitting needle because since we're doing top-down raglan shaping, there's going to be a lot of stitches on your needle at one time, even though it's a toddler sweater. Now, also, when you're following along with the video, make sure that you use the numbers for the size that you are making. I have a 12-month with me, so when I talk about the numbers, I'm going to be using the numbers for the 12-month size, but you might be making a bigger one. So make sure you use your numbers and not mine. Lastly, we're going to need some yarn, some worsted weight yarn in 2 colors. I like a solid color and then the multicolor for the accent, but you can do it all the same color if you like. Or you can use 2 solid colors, whatever floats your boat, and the exact amounts you need are on the pattern. And then you're going to need 4 stitch markers. Now, I have locking stitch markers because that was what was to hand, but they don't have to be locking. You can use the ring stitch markers if you have those. So the first thing I want to talk about is the cast on. Now, this is a provisional cast on, and all provisional means is that the cast on's not going to stay in the work. On a permanent cast on, you cast on, there it is, it's there forever. But since we're going top down for the body and sleeves, and then we have to go from the collar up to put on the hood, we're going to use a provisional cast on, so it's removable, and that provisional cast on is going to lay right here between the ribbing at the bottom of the hood and the actual neckline of the sweater. Now, the size of the crochet hook doesn't really matter, and I promise you're not crocheting. I know so many knitters are allergic to crocheting, and you're not going to have to do it. But using the crochet hook just as a tool makes your life a lot easier. So the size of the crochet hook doesn't really matter. I wouldn't go too far afield from the size of the knitting needle, but the cast-on gauge has nothing to do with the size of the crochet hook, so don't make yourself crazy. So the first thing I'm going to do is a slip knot. I'm sure you know how to do it, but make your ring and twist it, reach through, and pull up a loop. So I'm going to put the slip knot on my crochet hook. And that's how I'm going to begin. Obviously, I'm doing this right-handed. If you do it left-handed, your hook will be on the other side of the work. But I'm right-handed, so that's how we're going to do it. Now, I'm using the multicolor for the cast-on. You don't have to use the multicolor. You can use whatever yarn you have laying around. If you have scrap yarn, that works too, because remember, it's coming out. However, it's best to use a contrast color. Do not use the same color that you're using for the body of the sweater because it's harder to see when you're taking the cast on out if it's the same color as the body of the sweater. So I have my slip knot on my hook. I'm holding my knitting needle to the left of my hook. So I'm bringing the yarn over the crochet hook, but under the knitting needle, over the hook, pull it through the loop you already have. Now, if you're already a crocheter, you're essentially making a chain stitch. But if you're not a crocheter, that's okay too. So yarn goes under the knitting needle, over the crochet hook, pull it through the loop. Under the knitting needle, over the crochet hook, through the loop. For me today, I'm going to do this 45 times. So I have my 45 stitches on my needle. So I want to not knot this off permanently. I want to make sure I can get it undone later when I need to. So what I like to do is to make just a couple of chain stitches. So once again, if you know how to crochet, you're making like a chain 5. If you don't know how to crochet, you're just bringing your yarn over the needle from back to front and pulling it through the loop. You're not engaging the knitting needle at this point. You're just making some extra chains to keep the end accessible yet out of your way. Then clip the yarn can get this out of the way. And pull it through. Do not pull it tight because, again, we have to undo it later. So just loosely. All right, now I'm going to switch over to my main color yarn, and the first row on a provisional cast on, specifically on this provisional cast on, is a knit. It is very difficult to take a provisional cast on out of a purl stitch. So I'm going to knit one row. At the same time that I'm knitting, I'm going to place stitch markers to demarcate where the sleeve stitches are. So once again, I'm using the numbers from the small. If you are making a different size, make sure that you are using your numbers and not what I say in the video. So I'm going to knit 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Place a marker. Then I'm going to knit 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Place a marker. Then I'm going to knit 21 for the back. 1. And I'm going to double count because placing these markers is important. It's going to keep your increasing even for the whole rest of the sweater, so this is not a place you want to fudge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yay. Place a marker. 5 for the sleeve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Place a marker, and then 7 for the right front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, there's my first row. I have my 4 stitch markers spaced according to the instructions on the written pattern that you have, and that little extra chain's just out of the way. I don't have to deal with it until later. Now, except for the trimming, which again, this will all be written out in your pattern, except for the garter stitch trim where I use the separate color, all of the wrong side rows on the body are just purl back. So we're going to purl back, and you're going to slip the markers when you come to them. You just move them from the left needle to the right needle without doing anything to them. So this is simply a purl row. Just make sure to move the markers that they stay where they belong. All right, so I've come to the end of my purl row, and now I'm going to begin the raglan increasing, and this is where the stitch markers are important. So I'm going to knit until I get to the stitch before the first stitch marker, and I'm going to make an increase, and I'm going to use the knit front and back increase, and let me show you how that works. So I am on the stitch before the stitch marker. I'm going to knit in the front of the stitch and not push it off the left-hand needle. And then I'm going to knit again in the back of the stitch. So I'm putting 2 stitches in one. When that second stitch is complete, I can push it off the left-hand needle. Then I'm going to slip the marker and do it again. Knit in the front, knit in the back. Now, every time I come to a marker, I'm going to do the same thing, no matter how many stitches are on the row and no matter where that marker is. As long as I'm doing the increasing shaping, every time I see a marker, I'm going to knit front and back in the stitch before the marker, and I'm going to knit front and back in the stitch after the marker. So let's do that one more time. It's going to knit up to the stitch before the stitch marker, which is right here. And I'm going to knit front and back. That gives me an increase. Now, just for the sake of a visual, I've had 2 increases on the sleeve, right? I had one after the first marker and one before the second marker. I had 5 stitches in that section before. I should have 7 now, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. Slip the marker, and increase. I'm going to do this all the way across, and I will purl back, slipping the marker from one needle to the next without doing anything to it. And I'm just going to keep repeating these rows until I hit the length that is noted in the pattern. Generally speaking, it's in the 4 to 6 inch range. But look at your pattern, figure out what the number is, and you will keep doing this increase at the same time. Also at the same time, if you want to put in that optional garter stitch stripe, there's instructions in the pattern on how to do that too. Now, for that garter stitch stripe, obviously on the wrong side row, I'm not going to purl, I'm going to knit, but I'm going to do the increase exactly the same way, whether I'm working in stockinette stitch or working in garter stitch. It's a knit front and back before the marker, slip the marker, and a knit front and back after the marker. So, for you math people out there, we have 4 markers on the row. Each marker has 2 increases, one before it and one after it. So every row, every right side row that you knit will have 8 more stitches than the right side row before, right? And there's no increase on the wrong side. I also want to talk about how to separate the sleeves from the body. So your piece, of course, will be much bigger. Like I said, you're going to knit as far as you need to knit, following along in the pattern. But I want to show you real quick how we're going to separate the sleeves out, because we're going to work with them later. So to do that, you're going to knit to the first marker. Again, you will have many more stitches on your row than I do, because I just have this little sample and you will have done the entire yoke of the sweater. Now, I'm using waste yarn and a tapestry needle. If you want to use a commercial stitch holder, you can do that too. I don't like commercial stitch holders for small amounts because they kind of clank around and they make me crazy. But if that's what you want to use, that's fine. But I'm just going to use waste yarn and a tapestry needle. So I'm going to knit to the first marker and remove the marker. Then I'm going to take all the stitches from the sleeve section and I'm going to put them on the waste yarn. Remove that marker. And then what I like to do is just I'll just tie them off so that the waste yarn doesn't come out, and leave a good chunk of yarn so that when I want to put these stitches on the stitch holder, all I need to do is cut the yarn. But again, if you want to use a commercial stitch holder, that's fine. So those are my sleeve stitches and I've set them aside. So I'm going to knit across the back. So I went from the front to the back and the sleeve stitches are elsewhere. Make sure you give this one stitch a good tug because it wants to be too big because there's a lot of tension on that one stitch. So give that a good tug. Make sure it's not big and sloppy, and then you're going to knit all the way across the back. And again, remember you'll have way more stitches at that point than I do. So we remove the marker, use the waste yarn or the stitches or the stitch holder, put the sleeve stitches aside. Get rid of the other marker. Whoop, almost pulled that out. And go right to the front. Now you're going to continue on following the instructions in the pattern. You're going to knit the body of the sweater as long as it needs to be, and then put the border on the bottom. Don't worry about the button bands or the buttonholes. We're going to do those later. So you're going to knit the body as long as it needs to be. When the body is finished and bound off, you will come back separately and knit each sleeve one at a time. So you're going to take those stitches, those extra stitches, put them on your needle. You're going to cast on some stitches. The number will be in the pattern. Knit across the sleeve stitches, cast on some more, and knit the sleeves according to the instructions and then bind those off. When all of that is finished, we're going to go back up to the provisional cast on, unzip it, and pick up the stitches for the hood. So let's do that next. So now you have knit the body of your sweater down to the very end. You have knit your sleeves separately down to the very end, and you will not have sewn the seam yet probably, but you have your sleeves kicking over here, you have your body kicking over here, and now we're going to pick up the stitches and go north for the hood. So we're going to be working in this section right here. So you want to work from the side where those extra chains were. So I'm going to unchain the chains back to where the knitting is. Now, if you are a brave soul, you can go and rip the whole thing out and you have 45 loose stitches or however many you needed and you can put them on the needle. I am not usually that brave. It depends on the yarn. What I tend to do is unzip a couple at a time. So look, I'm pulling the crochet chain cast on and it's coming right out. And those are my live stitches. So I'm going to take those stitches and put them back on the knitting needle so that I can knit from there. Now, the most important thing is to get all these live stitches back on the needle in the right order, not twisted, so that I can go ahead and knit my hood. Now, I like to do this with the wrong side of the work facing me, as you can see, and then I'm bringing the stitches on the needle from back to front. If you are excellent at reading your knitting and you've accidentally twisted one, again, you can accommodate that. Your next row is going to be a row of ribbing. So on your next row, you'll be looking at the right side so you can fix whatever needs fixing. All right, so I'm going to do this all the way across until I have all of these stitches up on my needle. Then the next thing I'm going to do is turn the work this way. So the sweater's down here, and I'm knitting up. Once all of these stitches are up on the needle, you're going to work 5 rows in a knit 1 purl 1 ribbing. The point of this is to keep the sweater a little closer around your toddler's neck. It's just a little more comfortable. Then I'm going to switch to stockinette stitch, and following along in the pattern, I'm going to place 2 markers and I'm going to have increases. So that's so the shape of the hood gets a little bigger. So it starts down here at the collar, and then it's going to get a little bit bigger in the back to accommodate the toddler's head. Those increases on that section are exactly the same increases that you have already done in the raglan shaping. So this is an interesting piece of construction. You started at the collar. There are your raglan increases that I was talking about, which is the same as the increases you did down here. Then you worked even, like I said. So now you have a wide piece of knitting, and now we have to close the top of the hood. So the way we are doing that is by centrally placed decreases. So following along in the pattern, the thing you need to do is count your number of stitches and place a marker in the center. Once again, I'm just using a small swatch. I don't have a whole sweater going here. But you want to make sure that you have that marker exactly in the center. So there are 4 decreases on the right side rows, and there are 2 decreases on the wrong side rows. So let me show you how this works. It should say knit to 4 stitches before the marker. Let me see here. So 4 stitches before the marker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to knit 2 together twice. So knit 2 together, knit 2 together, slip the marker, and knit 2 together twice. Knit 2 together, knit 2 together, and knit to the end of the row. Again, it's an odd sort of construction. It's sort of a variation on short rows. But what it does is it gives that nice little decorative edge on the top, but it also closes the top of the hood without you having to make a seam in it. I know a lot of hood patterns have seams in them, and I don't like them because they're not comfortable. So this avoids the whole seaming thing. Okay, on the wrong side row, I'm going to purl until 4 before the marker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, one more. Now remember, I said we had 4 decreases on the right side. We only have 2 on the wrong side, so I'm going to purl 2 together, purl 2, slip the marker, purl 2, purl 2 together. and purl to the end of the row. I'm going to do 2 more rows so you can see how the work is turning. So as you can see, so the work was straight, knitting back and forth, and now you can see it's starting to curve. So what's going to happen is the 2 sides of the work as we knit are going to join together, and that will be the front of the hood. So like I said, let's just do 2 more rows just to reinforce the idea. So I'm knitting to 4 before the marker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Knit 2 together twice. So knit 2 together, knit 2 together, slip the marker, knit 2 together twice, knit 2 together, knit 2 together, and then knit to the end of the row. All right, and let's do 1 more wrong side row. Purl across to 4 before the marker. And these rows get shorter and shorter and shorter because there's so many decreases. Remember, we're taking 4 stitches out on every right side row and 2 on every wrong side row. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to purl 1 more. Purl 2 together. Purl 2. Slip the marker. Purl 2. Purl 2 together. And purl to the end of the row. Again, I'm just sliding it to the cable. You see how roughly that's getting? That's exactly what we want. So I'm just sliding it onto the cable so it'll lay the way it wants to. So once again, you can see that the edges are getting closer together. And there's our little decorative stitching happening. This is where the decreases are. And so the work is going to go like this. And eventually the hood will close up in the front. All right, you have the bulk of your knitting finished. We have 1 more step to do, and that is the front trim, which incorporates the button band, the trim for the front of the hood, and the buttonhole band all at the same time. So you're going to start with the right side facing at the bottom right-hand corner of the front of the sweater, and you're going to pick up stitches starting at the bottom, going up the right front, going all the way around the hood, and going down the left front till you get to the other end. So now you're knitting back and forth in rows, and it is a huge number of stitches, and that is another reason that we encourage you to use a circular needle and not a straight needle, so you can accommodate all those stitches. The other thing that we have is 7 buttonholes evenly spaced across the top. So I want to talk about the buttonhole very briefly. So to do the buttonholes, it is a 2-stitch decrease. So I'm going to not say numbers on camera because the numbers will be different according to the size. But you're going to knit some stitches, and then you're going to knit 2 together twice. Knit 2 together, knit 2 together. All right, so that's where that buttonhole is going to go. And then you're going to knit some more stitches. But the thing that I want to talk about is the number of stitches between the buttonholes. And again, I don't want to say a specific number because it'll be different and it'll be in your pattern. But as an example, let's say it says decrease to knit 2 together twice and then knit 5. So I've knit 2 together twice, and then I'm going to knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I'm looking at this, there's actually 6 stitches in there. There's the 5 that I knit because I told you to knit, but there's that 1 that's hanging out after the last knit 2 together. So make sure when you're double counting to make sure that everything's where it belongs. If I say knit 5 or knit 6 or knit 4 or knit however many, that's in addition to the stitch that's already there after the buttonhole. I'm actually going to undo a couple because I want to put 1 more little knit 2 together in here. So 1 more little buttonhole. Again, I'm not spacing them properly here on the video. I'm just trying to show you the stitches before we run out of time. So knit 2 together. So now coming back on the next row, and again the math will be written in the pattern. You're going to knit up until you come to the gap. So there's the gap for the buttonhole. And now you have to cast on 2 stitches. Different cast-ons work different ways. I honestly think the easiest is the cursive E cast on. I know we don't use it for a lot of things because it can be sloppy, but for 2 stitches I think it's fine, and it's the easiest way to get the yarn from the right hand to the left hand. So all I'm going to do is make a loop with the yarn, twist it, and put it on the right hand needle, make a loop with the yarn, twist it, put it on the right hand needle. Now I've cast on 2, I can move on to the next gap. So I'm going to do that one more time. Pull up a loop and twist it, put it on the right hand needle, pull up a loop, twist it, put it on the right hand needle. There's my 2 cast on. And again, specific math will be written in the pattern. All right, and there is my buttonhole. There's one there, and there's one there. So the next row of the pattern is just a knit row. You're going to continue in garter stitch as many rows as the pattern tells you, and then you're going to bind off. At that point, here's all you have to do. You have to block it. You have to weave your ends in. You have to sew your buttons on, and you have to sew up those sleeve seams. Now, a lot of people ask why I don't do the sleeves in the round in a situation like this, and I put the seams in there. A lot of people are allergic to seams. They would rather not do any seams at all. I like seams in baby sweaters from a structural perspective. It keeps the sleeve sitting where it needs to be neatly. They tend to torque if they're seamless. That's my opinion. So you have to sew up that sleeve seam, and at the very, very end, there will be a little gap right here where you cast on the sleeve stitches. So you have a tiny little bit of underarm seam to sew. It's usually about this wide. Thank you so much for joining me. I had a great time explaining all these different techniques to you. Now you have not only this wonderful sweater, but some more techniques in your bag. I'm Mary Beth Temple. I'll see you again soon.